with 50 stars on it. The flag symbolizes freedom, pride, justice, and caring for each other, happiness, honor, spirit. It makes me proud to be an American. The flag is really pretty.
3, 2, 1. Go throttle up, Jeffrey.
What is the Taliban?
I was very fearful of the Taliban because they would be people who wouldn't obey the rules. We were not able to play simple things like soccer and couldn't even listen to music.
And why are they a target in the war on terrorism?
Since the Taliban have thrown in their lot with Osama bin Laden, the United States has had to go to war against both of them.
When do maps stretch the truth?
One should approach maps very carefully. They're never neutral, and they're never totally truthful. Political choices are made, design choices are made.
And how do they shape the way we see the world?
World maps use what we call projections. There are dozens of different projections. Some projections distort some parts of the world more than others.
People don't notice that Greenland is huge in comparison to Africa when it really isn't in real life.
Who is the king of softball?
I'm Eddie Feiner, and I'm the guy that has the 4-man softball team. Well, we've played about a little over 11,000 games in 104 countries.
And what makes this fearsome foursome such a hit? Find out this week on the show that asks the questions. Nick News with Linda Ellerby.
You know by now that the ruling government of the country of Afghanistan is called the Taliban. You know that this government has refused to turn over terrorists, including Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda organization. You know that because of this, the United States has led a coalition of governments in air and ground strikes on the Taliban. But exactly what is the Taliban?
I was very fearful of the Taliban because they would be people who wouldn't obey the rules. We were not able to play simple things like soccer and couldn't even listen to music.
I was 13 or 14 years old when the Taliban came to power, and my life was very hard. I could not leave my house without wearing a burqa.
Girls in Afghanistan can't attend school. Here I can attend school and I can do whatever I please, and I can play outside if I want to. My name is Sadika and I'm 11 years old.
Sadika and her friends are newcomers to America. They can't speak English yet, but through an interpreter, they talked about their home in Afghanistan. Life had become unbearable there under the brutal rule of the Taliban.
If we were caught playing outside, the Taliban would tell us to go back into our homes, or they would tell us to go into the mosque and learn something.
The word Taliban means religious student. The Taliban are Muslims. A Muslim is someone who believes in the religion of Islam. The Taliban took control of Afghanistan in 1996 after a bloody civil war there. Millions were killed. Afghanistan was in chaos. The Taliban said they would rule Afghanistan under Islamic law, that is, according to the Muslims' holy book called the Quran. That sounded pretty good to Afghans after 20 years of civil war. The people hoped these religious scholars would bring peace and stability at long last. Instead, the situation in Afghanistan went from bad to worse.
The Taliban are very extreme in their interpretation of the Quran. My name is Dr. Laurie Eisenberg, and I teach in the history department at Carnegie Mellon University. The way they choose to understand Islam has made for a very unpleasant government and for a terrible situation for the people in Afghanistan.
Under Taliban law, we weren't allowed to listen to music, and if they could hear it from our homes, they would come in and destroy our tape player and the tape, and we also weren't allowed to watch TV. and the girls weren't allowed to play outside.
Children are not allowed to play with toys. There's no kites, no games, no balls.
The Taliban have especially harsh laws concerning women and girls. By law, every woman must wear a burqa, a heavy cloak that covers her from head to toe. If her arm or face or hair is accidentally exposed, the woman or girl could be beaten.
When the Taliban came into power, I was taken out of school. The people in my area set up courses so we could keep learning. And the Taliban found out, and they banned those as well.
Women in Afghanistan are not allowed to work or even leave the house, let alone get an education.
How did the Taliban become the enemy of the United States? This is where Osama bin Laden comes into the picture. Osama bin Laden is the man America suspects is behind the September 11th terrorist attacks. He is not a member of the Taliban. He is not even from Afghanistan. He is Saudi Arabian, and he is rich, very rich. And he agrees with the Taliban that all non-Muslims are infidels, enemies to be destroyed. U.S. officials say bin Laden is hiding in Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban rule.
Since the Taliban have thrown in their lot with Osama bin Laden, the United States has had to go to war against both of them in its war against terrorism.
Many Muslims around the world have strongly and loudly condemned the Taliban. The Quran, like the Bible, preaches peace and tolerance. Most Muslims are offended by the Taliban's interpretation of their religion.
There are Muslim countries all over the world whose children have toys and games and go out and play, but it's this particular regime, the Taliban, that creates this really joyless society.
My dream for Afghanistan is for the people to live in peace and for the Taliban to be brought down from power.
We'll be right back after these messages. And now back to our show.
Mark Twain wrote a clever book you may already have read. It's called A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. In this book, a guy time travels back to the time of the Round Table and ends up teaching King Arthur and all his knights all sorts of crazy things, including baseball. Now, it might be said that the king has come to teach us a thing or two, only this time it's softball. Hear now the adventurous art of the king and his court.
Play ball!
The king is Eddie Feiner. Eddie started the team with 3 of his boyhood chums in 1946. Somebody dared them to play 4 against 9. They won a game. Somebody saw that game and said, hey, come play that game against us. And it grew from there.
You're out!
Well, we've played about a little over 11,000 games in 104 countries. We've played in over 6,000 cities in North America. I pitched to all those batters, all those different games, and I guess I struck out about 130,000. I struck out about 20,000 of them blindfolded. They weren't blindfolded, I was. I'm Eddie Feiner, and I'm the guy that has the 4-man softball team.
My name is Rich Hoppy. I'm the pitcher for the King and his court.
I'm Jack Knight, and I'll be catching for the king and his court.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Feiner. I play first base.
The king and his court will play a mix of hard-nosed, fast-pitch softball and a lot of humor.
Pitch! Out! Yeah!
If you've seen the Globetrotters, then you would know what the King and his court is.
Thank you, guys. That's great.
There's trick pitching, there's little gags in there.
between the legs, behind the back, and we do things that aren't allowed in a real game of softball.
I'm going to pitch out around second base.
It's a night of good, clean fun, family fun, and great athleticism.
We make you laugh and remember that sports are supposed to be fun.
Liam?
Go, yours? Well, the King and his Court, this is its 56th year. They still come to see Eddie. He's moved out an inning by inning at a time, but it's still about his presence. He's the king.
They don't care if I pitch in the game or throw it 100 miles an hour. They like to hear the stories.
Eddie, I saw you 25 years ago, and now I'm bringing my boy.
All right, where was it?
Orlando?
Orlando?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Recently, Sports Illustrated did a survey of the top teams of all time. The King and his Court was voted number 8, the greatest teams in the history of sport.
The reason people come back to watch us after 56 years, the reputation of the King and his Court is that we're a great show. We're funny, and we have talent. The four of us could beat anybody in baseball, too.
Let's give the gang that we played tonight a very nice hand for their half the game.
This is the part of the show where we often poke fun at grown-ups. But the King and his Court are proof that some grown-ups can come up with some pretty amazing ideas. And then there's this. Can an idea be good and silly at the same time? While you watch this, ask yourself another question. Who's in charge here?
Goats are great. They're very intelligent, they're very curious, and they work really hard getting the brush down. I'm Ann Peischel, and I run Goats Unlimited. The business uses goats to prevent fires. The goats eat the lower branches of trees, tall grasses, and weeds. Fire travels very fast, so if we can eliminate any of the vegetation that's down low, it will help slow down the fire. If the fire is moving slower, it's easier for the fire crews to get the fire out. It's going to save homes, livestock, and it's also going to save the forest.
We'll be right back after these messages. And now back to our show.
Next time you look at a map, turn it upside down. Does it look weird? Now ask yourself, why should it? I mean, who decided north should be at the top anyway? This story asks that question and others, such as, if you had a life-size map of the world, would you have to be standing on it right now? Think about it. Actually, that's what this story is really about, how maps change the way we think.
When people think of geography, they think of maps. Geography is technically anything that can be mapped.
World maps, depending on how they're designed, can influence the way we look at the world.
Sometimes your own sort of prejudices can slip into what goes on a map that you're making.
Maps tell a story. They're designed to communicate a message of some sort and to be used as a tool. It's just like an advertiser in designing a billboard. My name is Inez Miyares. I'm an associate professor of geography at Hunter College in New York City. Some very commonly used maps, such as one called the Mercator, make the North American continent, Europe, and Russia look much larger than they should. People see that map and say, well, this makes my country look larger than it is, more important than it is.
Maps shape the way people see the world in very important ways. That's why we at National Geographic Society think about it very hard. My name is Alan Carroll. I'm chief cartographer at the National Geographic Society. Cartographers are map makers. If you imagine the world as an orange and you're unpeeling the orange, then you try to flatten that orange peel onto a flat surface. It's not going to flatten, and you might have to stretch and squeeze things. So world maps use what we call projections. There are dozens of different projections. Some projections distort some parts of the world more than others. The world map that's probably the most familiar is the Mercator.
The Mercator, people don't notice that Greenland is huge in comparison to Africa when it really isn't in real life. I'm Stephen Young. I participated in the 2000 Geography Bee, and I'm going to compete in the International Geographic Olympiad. My interest in geography was developed by my parents, and like just reading maps and all that. Maps aren't really used for like reading purposes. They're generally for reference. If you want to find out where a place is, the map is perfect. That's what it's designed to do. But in order to fully understand, you need to match it up with information from books and other sources. Like the internet's perfect now for that. Maps can definitely have an aspect of bias in them. I think that map makers are influenced by like what country they live in. There's a syndrome basically called the belly button syndrome, where map makers will naturally put their country in the middle of the map. For example, if you look at Chinese maps, China's in the center of the map, and it's absolutely huge.
One should approach maps very carefully. They're never neutral, and they're never totally truthful. Political choices are made, design choices are made. Which projection do I want for my map of the world? I'm Alice Hudson. I'm chief of the map division at the New York Public Library. In the map room, we have to do a lot of hands-on teaching about where is north. What does the index to the map tell me? Having north at the top is typical of most maps, but it's not always true. There's a company in Australia, for example, that has produced a world map with south at the top. So all the continents are, from our perspective, floating up, and Australia is at the top of the map. The Peters projection is controversial in that it distorts the shape of continents and regions.
There are geographers who believe that it more accurately represents the importance of Africa, of Asia, of Latin America. The key is not to favor one part of the world over another. And if what we're trying to do is teach students how to see the world as it is currently, then we want to use a projection that captures size and shape as well as possible.
It may sound easy, but it's really hard.
This is the part of the show we call the Kid Front. These are stories about what American kids are doing to help, to make us feel better in these difficult times. Here's one I think you'll like.
When a war is like going on in your country, you probably want to get into the safest place you can. The United States is bombing Afghanistan, so understandably many people are leaving their towns and going to refugee camps that have been set up away from the bombing sites. Kids in refugee camps, they don't have a bed to sleep in, they don't have very warm clothes. They're poor, they really don't have anything. We're just trying to help the children. Are there scissors in that bag, Megan? Feed the Children is a worldwide organization. We try to help children all over the world who need our help. We're making emergency relief kits for the children of Afghanistan. They're going to the children in the refugee camps because they barely have their necessities. The health kits contain like washcloth, soap, toothpaste, a toothbrush, a comb or a brush. They've got Band-Aids. If they scratch their knee, they can close up the wound easier. They've got notebooks. They've got pencils. They can draw pictures if they want to. Like just simple things, but for them, I mean, it's like a luxury almost. We take a lot of things for granted. They don't have most of the things that we have. They're just like us, they're children. It's just horrible to think that somebody just like us has so little. I think that the Afghani children will be glad. It might give them hope to go on that they might have lost. I hope that when they get the relief kits, they'll realize that like people really care.
This edition of Nick News is brought to you by the word tyranny. The Taliban government in Afghanistan is a tyranny. That is, the people of Afghanistan did not elect this government, and this government does not allow people to think for themselves. It does not allow people choices of the kind we have here. To do this, it must be well organized and ruled by force, often killing those who disagree. But tyranny is always more organized than freedom, because freedom means just that. Free to make your own choices, free to be yourself. That is something we revere here in America. As for the Taliban, we have seen in Afghanistan the Taliban vision of how it would like the rest of the world to be. And we have chosen freedom. Messy, disorganized, rowdy freedom. The only antidote to tyranny. This is Nick News. If you want to know, ask.
Nick News airs commercial-free weekday mornings as part of Cable in the Classroom and may be taped for educational use. For more information, call your local cable company.